Hello, everyone. My name's Tom Spare. Welcome to Spare a Thought, the podcast that shines a light on people, organisations, issues, and ideas that are often go underreported or are misrepresented in the media. Today is part two of my conversation with Ben Kitchener, Spare a Thought for the Welsh language. If you haven't heard part one yet, I'd recommend heading back to episode 53, which is in the show notes, where we discuss the government's 2050 speaker goals and the economic challenges facing Wales and the Welsh language today. In this concluding episode, we dive into the Blue Books and the Victorian era policies that explicitly tried to stigmatise Welsh speakers. We also discuss the prestige of the language in the professional world and some practical phrases to get you started with the language yourself. So, here's part two of Spare a Thought for the Welsh language. There was this crossover between an element of benign and then maybe more insidious policies that the British government introduced around education. But a lot of it, my understanding, was at the turn of the century when there was greater levels of education being introduced and education reform, that local populations were like, well, we sort of have to learn English for them to get anywhere economically, because Wales had been so agricultural for so long that English was an opportunity to earn more. Is that a okay reading of it, or is it a bit more?
I think, broadly, it's a factor of this is how language substitution starts inevitably of this situation linguistically that's called diglossia, where two languages exist in the same place, but they have different associations. And so you'll often have a language of prestige, of universities, academia, politics, and then you'll have a language of the home, the family. And if you have that unstable bilingualism, the diglossia, inevitably, because of the opportunities that are available with the language that's associated with prestige, more and more people will learn it. It will lead to less and less use, and then it will stop being used in those environments like the home, because parents will choose to stop passing down their kind of mother tongue, so to speak.
Yeah.
I think in Wales it's interesting as well, because you do have the history of things like the Welsh Not is the big one that everyone knows about, which is the kind of Victorian era policy of kind of demonising the Welsh language at schools to make sure that everyone spoke good English. And, often it did become physical punishment was a part of that, but also just kind of outing people for speaking Welsh in an attempt to push English. But the bigger tragedy is the Blue Books, where there was a report done and it blamed Welsh for the backwardness of the country, the kind of the agrarian nature, and the fact that Wales wasn't performing better in the mind of these people who were doing the survey. They blamed the Welsh language in large part for that, and that did huge damage to the prestige of Welsh. And the prestige of language is fundamental in terms of how well it survives. If people don't think it's going to get you opportunities, you won't learn it. And we're not fully out of that yet. It has changed. There is a lot more positivity around Welsh, but you still find in academic papers in the 2010s and even more recently that young people going through A-levels who've gone through Welsh medium will often choose to go back to English depending on the career they want, because of stereotypes about how they will be treated if they go through Welsh medium education. So, typical example, if you wanted to teach, you would often choose Welsh because it's seen as, if there's a much bigger demand for Welsh teachers, it's a kind of guarantee of a job within Wales in a way. And so that encourages people to choose Welsh. But many people who want to become lawyers in the city of London have stereotypes about how the people of the city would treat them and how hard it would be to learn these specialist terms in Welsh. They often cite the fact that they'd want to be comfortable using specialist vocabulary in the language they would be using in these jobs. And so they themselves may choose to go back to English. And these dynamics are still going on. And because we've not really spoken at a wider level about the politics behind all of this, the fact that actually this prestige isn't real. You can do both. You can study through Welsh and still be perfectly fine at doing the specialist vocabulary in English. Those stereotypes still factor into a lot of people's decision making. So it's never a neutral choice. The language you choose is always a factor of the people you're surrounded by, the environment you live in, and the stuff you've heard and the way you've grown up. There is no such thing as a neutral choice when it comes to that. So, we've all heard jokes at the expense of the Welsh language. That will inevitably affect whether you choose to learn it one day or not. It's hard to escape that. And it comes from that mixed history of, yes, a lot of people did choose to learn English because it was viewed as the language of opportunity, but there is a reason it was viewed as the language of opportunity, which is the history of things like the Blue Books, things like Welsh Not. So it's a very complex kind of nitty-gritty journey to get to this point where we are today.
I mean, there's the argument, I suppose we don't need to labour it or cover it too much, but around Wales sort of being England's first colony, the experiments that were used in Wales were then deployed to Scotland and to Ireland, and then obviously in creating the empire as well, and that sort of part of it. I suppose the question is then the case for bilingualism in Wales and a bilingual Wales. So let's make sort of the positive case. Why is a bilingual Wales good for everyone who lives here, not just Welsh speakers? And what does Wales gain that it wouldn't if it was a only English speaking nation?
I think there's tons to this. I think the first thing is people who grow up with more than one language often have kind of better cognitive skills in terms of reasoning, because your brain is being forced to switch between two languages quite a lot. It's quite taxing to do that. But if you've got that as a natural skill, it's really powerful. You reduce the risk of Alzheimer's and dementia later on in life. So there are literally physical benefits to speaking more than one language growing up. It then broadens your horizons. It gives you a different culture, a different way to think about things. It often makes you better at problem solving because you can kind of think about how things would be described in the two different languages or multiple languages you speak. You're not just limited to that one kind of framing of how you speak about things. There are many different phrases where they don't translate perfectly, and you're forced to kind of find ways around that to express yourself in both languages. I think in terms of, we look at things through a very economic lens in terms of people will question, languages and the arts in general because it's not viewed as economically productive. Yet it is possibly one of the biggest kind of unique selling points of Wales is the language. It's not anywhere else in the UK. Welsh is a huge thing here that you could, jobs through teaching the language, jobs through kind of encouraging other people to learn it. The translation industry that exists is fairly strong. There are many benefits there that would kind of give Wales, if everyone spoke Welsh, a much kind of more unique edge. And there are many Welsh speakers who will say, a lot of their jobs have been a factor of the fact that they can speak Welsh. And that is, it's something we should celebrate. But obviously we want more people to be able to access that. We don't want it to be something that's exclusive. And I think that's another really big thing internationally. If we go outside of just the kind of UK framework, people who speak more than one language are often much more employable than people who only speak one because of, ironically, as much as machine translation is becoming better, we can't hide from that. The desire for people who understand different cultures and can bridge the gaps because of how connected we are has kind of skyrocketed as a part of that. And so in many other countries, languages like English and other languages are a requirement for the kind of higher end jobs. And I think for me, that would be the positive case for a bilingual Wales, but also it's, as I said before, it's a values thing. And one of the Catalan teachers I met in Cardiff said something to me one day that kind of changed my framing of things, which is, they talk about language rights in Catalonia and in other places like Quebec as well. We kind of do and don't here. It depends who you speak to. And they made a really fascinating point, which was, you can't really exercise your right to use a language if no one else speaks it. So there's no good having a right if there aren't speakers of Welsh to use it with.
Mm.
And so we can talk about we're going to get to 1 million speakers. We can talk about we're going to double use. But, if we don't guarantee that everyone can speak Welsh, it doesn't mean that, we could have 1 million speakers and a lot of them will be down somewhere where Welsh isn't that used, or you're not necessarily starting your conversations in Welsh because let's take Cardiff as an example. We've got a big Welsh speaking population, but it's not a majority here. So many people will start in English. So even if you learn Welsh in Cardiff, it's much harder to try and find people to speak it with. And then all of that ambition is left unfulfilled with tons of people often speaking to each other who could have that conversation in Welsh, not realizing you can have it in Welsh, having it in English. And I think for me, it's that ability, I really regret that I wasn't raised bilingually. I regret that we lost German as a language. I wish as a language student, I could have been raised with another language because it makes it so much easier to learn more. And there are so many benefits. And I struggle when people don't necessarily see that that's, we could really realistically, in a few decades' time, with the right policies in place, get to a situation where everyone in Wales could enjoy those benefits and the kind of just being able to speak another language.
Mm.
And I think that's the positive vision there for me of we could genuinely have that here, and yet we're not really on the right track.
I mean, I made the mistake of trying to learn as soon as I got here, and that was a mistake because really you need to sort of, with the way my brain works, I need to absorb things for quite a long time to even start to understand what that means or to pick stuff up. And also I think when I moved to Wales, I didn't know how long I was going to be here for example. So I think there was a bit of a reluctance there. The thing of like, you can't really understand a country until you at least understand the importance of the language, the culture. And for example, what we haven't mentioned here is that Wales is one of the oldest languages in Europe. And so Wales's tradition, what we know now as Welsh traditions, a lot of them were 19th century invention. But obviously there's a lot of heritage and a lot of stories and the Mabinogion and all those sorts of texts. And I was doing an interview for a later episode about filmmaker Dan Freeman's making a film Excalibur, not the original Excalibur, but sort of a new vision, all based in Wales with Welsh craftspeople and so on. We were talking about the importance of understanding the stories that are told, and you can't really know that unless you actually speak the language, or at least you have that clear translation. I was going to say about, what advice would you give to people moving to Wales, and particularly English people, because sometimes I could say this because I'm English as well, but there might be a bit of an ignorance towards Welsh, to Wales history, because we're not taught it. I mean, we're not taught about the terrible things that England's done to Wales, Scotland, Ireland, and the rest of the world. But I think to end on a more positive note, taking Welsh with you to listeners here today, but also then when this goes out onto the podcast, if listeners can take one thing away from this conversation, let's give them some Welsh. Could you teach us 3 or 4 phrases, which I might try here, or I might try on a recorded version later on, for you to teach, Ben, if you're comfortable with that?
This has been the part I've been dreading the most because my Welsh is not perfect as well. But I think there are some really basic words that are less known than I think they are, and I try using them. And so people know diolch and bore da, which is thank you, and then good morning, which are really important. But things like hi, shemai, it's just a really easy way to into any conversation and just to signal that, you're willing to speak Welsh. So shemai, or, sit my, how are things going, sit oiti. Those are the kind of the biggest things that will help. I think the other things are kind of the really easy phrases that, because of context, you could use with English speaking people and everyone would understand just through the context. So things like cheers, when you're doing a cheers, you don't need to understand the words that are being used. So in Welsh, it would be iechyd da, and it literally means good health. So that would be one of the things I'd encourage people to do, is to just go away, and anytime you cheers and you're in, anywhere in Wales or even England, just say iechyd da. And people will pick up on it. We often joke with it in other languages as well. A very good one, if you're trying to survive a conversation and you've been learning a bit and you're struggling, is just the word for okay or fine, because that's fairly applicable. So it's one of my favorite words. It's iawn, IAWN, but it's just a really fun word to say. I think the other things that are fundamental to any language, and this is a tip in general, and you can find your own, are filler words. Words where you're trying to think and you just need some time. So things like felly, which means so, or dwi ddim yn siŵr, I'm not sure. Things that connect sentences. Well, I often end sentences way too much with this, but ac yn y blaen, you will hear Welsh speakers saying all the time, and it just literally means and so on, or etc.
Oh,
And you will hear it all the time, and it's just a way to sound more kind of natural and disguise the fact that you might be struggling with a conversation. I still do this with my friends. And it's a way to kind of hide the fact you're struggling and move on, or just add some extra stuff, a throwaway sentence. It's one of my favorites. And then Deifgol, Dewi, hapus, happy St. David's Day, or Dewi Sant St. David. That will be useful coming up. But yeah, it's those, things like say shemai when you say hi, or say diolch to the driver when you get off the bus. They will often, people are aware of those ones, but it's those small things that you can use even with people who don't understand Welsh. And the last one is, we've got this very famous, like when people are ready to leave a pub, you just hit your hands on your legs and just say, right. And everyone knows you're ready to leave. In Welsh, to say, let's go, it's bantani.
Okay, bantani.
Bantani. And again, you can do all the same body language, but people will understand you more or less. Or, maybe they won't, and you just leave the pub.
Yeah, you become a bit of an enigma to the people around you. You just sort of disappear. There's some when I want to check someone's okay with what I've just said, or if there's a set of instructions or something, I go hapus, and I go, I'm happy. It's not a full sentence, but it's like, are you happy with that? And then good afternoon is prynhawn da. So bore da, prynhawn da. Bore da is far easier to remember than prynhawn da. And then nos da is good night, which I think,
yes,
and that's nice. At the end of the day, so nos da
is really good. There's also, like, if you want to just wish someone a good day, dif daiti or dif daichi, is just a nice way to, end a conversation. I always try learning that in every language because it's just fun. Normally, it's always a fun phrase or sentence as well. It's fairly easy, but yeah, it's always the easy wins when you're first learning a language. Find the shortcuts. What I do with every language I've ever learned is I know the words I use a lot, and I know what I want to talk about. Learn those. Don't waste time learning. A lot of the courses that you'll do, they have to teach you every single word, for like mum, dad, you go through the family, you go through, and it feels quite repetitive. Find the words you will use. Find words to express yourself. So in every language, you're probably going to need things like I think that. So in Welsh, it's dwi'n meddwl, or like I believe, or I'm not sure, or maybe. So dwi ddim yn siŵr, dwi'n credu, I believe, or maybe is efallai, or if you're in the north, ella, which is, again, that throws some of my friends off because people use different things. But again, those are the things you should spend your time learning when you first start a language. Just make a list of like 10, 20 words or phrases that will give you the keys to kind of make your own sentences so that you can say what you actually want to say, and you're not forever stuck saying, I've got a dog at home.
Yeah.
Which is great. We'd love to understand that, but it's not going to get you much more from the conversation than if they have a pet.
It's like, the cat is in the tree, or the cat is under the tree.
Yeah, the famous Duolingo examples are always really, really entertaining. The panas, I think the parsnips of the Welsh Duolingo.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
It comes up all the time, and it's to make you remember it because it's slightly funnier. It's those kind of really boring everyday words that we don't even think we're using that are really, really, really important.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's all the incidental stuff. I remember because I've got a Japanese family, and I was going around different temples and collecting. Each temple had like a different type of calligraphy, and you could sort of collect them and go to each temple and do it. And I said to my sister-in-law Mayuko, "Is there any phrases I could use that might surprise the people that are doing this? Because they're seeing all these people, thousands of people every day, and they're sort of like quickly doing it." And I said, "Is there any way? Is a different way of saying thank you or something?" And she said, "Well, say okini, which is the thank you in the local region." And so I did this each time, and it this row of all these Japanese folks, and oh, very good. And then they sort of like carry on, but it's just a small gesture.
You'll find that when you use Welsh in places like Cardiff, it's one of my favourite things to do. If you do, a lot of the time they won't speak Welsh, but if you do find someone who does speak Welsh, they appreciate it so much more. And it happened on a GWR train, they don't often have Welsh announcements, and there was someone working who announced something in Welsh on a train that was coming in late that I happened to be on. It's the first time I'd heard it, so I made an effort to go and thank them at the end. And it just, it brightens up everyone's day because it's that shared experience of you've connected with someone who's also going through the same, trying to find people to speak it with. And it's always seems quite hard, but it's always worthwhile. And I've always been able to find at least a few people who speak Welsh in Cardiff. And then you just have a chat. It's a much longer chat than if there are some people who are very comfortable with talking to everyone. My mum does this back home. She will speak to everyone in the town. It's really frustrating sometimes because you're just trying to get to, go and sit down and you just want a coffee. And then you bump into everyone on the way. But if it's a really easy way in, because whenever you do find someone who speaks Welsh, it's normally a longer conversation, and it always feels slightly more meaningful because you've found that kind of shared identity in a way.
Yeah, yeah, commonality. Well, as you were saying, community, but also like I think that's a case of smaller nations, isn't it? Or smaller countries, like say like Ellis James's Cymru connection.
Yes.
How the term Wales is a village. It's not a disparaging thing to say that it's very important. I find in whatever job you're in to leave on good terms because it's a very interconnected country, and you'll find that you're talking to someone's cousin or someone's they went to school with or what have you, so it becomes a very bit of and I remember one of my bosses at one point said there's a strong institutional memory in this part of wherever it was. And we did this thing 10 years ago, and people still remember it. People have very long memories. So yeah, I think it's making sure that there's a good gestures of compatriotism, even if it's just a very small gesture. It goes a long way.
Yeah, it really does. I think it's one of my favourite things about Welsh is when, that community. It's given me an entirely different perspective living in Wales, even in Cardiff, which is kind of stereotyped as not having a huge Welsh speaking population, even though there are actually if you look at the numbers, not the percentage, quite a lot.
Yeah. And I think also I was doing this a bit in my dissertation, looking at Welsh media, the Welsh media landscape, and if you were to consume news in Welsh, the news in Welsh, your perception of Wales would probably be a bit different to if you consume it in English. So like English language news is very much Wales is part of the UK. We look to London, and then London looks to the world. Whereas in the Welsh language media, it's very much Wales is a country looking out to the world.
I should make that point as well, but if you ever want, the latest on language stuff, very frustratingly, it's almost always on those Welsh medium channels, and it really breaks into the English ones. And I find that interesting because it's kind of giving an importance to something, and it's making an assumption, isn't it? So there was an annual population survey that found another drop in use. And again, that was on BBC Cymru Deal, which is really important to be there, but it was only there.
That's the thing, and so your perceptions of the world what media you consume already, or, we all live in our silos and in our algorithm and whatnot. But I think probably in Welsh language news versus English news, that's existed probably for a considerable amount of time anyway. And it also means that the BBC news teams are the largest in Wales in comparison to the rest of the UK, one of the reasons why we've got such a massive BBC presence here is because everything needs to be bilingual. So, so that sort of brings its own challenge and everything as well. That's everything from me today, all my questions. I suppose the final thing really is to thank you, Ben, for joining today. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you, diolch.
We can all use one of those phrases as a small act, but meaningful one towards becoming the nation in its fullness that has yet to be. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you very much. And that's the end today.
Like you don't